My hand lingered on the brass doorknob of the Harborview Grill for a full 4 seconds longer than necessary. I straightened my sports jacket and, pulling on the dark gray suit I wore to retirements and funerals, pushed the door open. Dominic was the first to notice me. I caught it in my peripheral vision. In that millisecond, all eyes darted from head to toe, to my shoes, and back up again. His expression remained impassive, but something shifted beneath it. I'd seen that look in interrogation rooms when suspects realized their alibis were collapsing. Mr. Brennan. He finally stood up and extended his hand with the enthusiasm of someone who was unconsciously doing something. His handshake was relaxed, their fingers barely touching. Thanks for coming all this way. My daughter Rebecca said you didn't care much about the formal dress code. My daughter stood up quickly and kissed me on the cheek. Hi, Dad. I hope the traffic isn't too heavy. I've been driving in Boston for 58 years, honey. I find restaurants. We settled down at the table. Dominic and Rebecca sat on one side, and I sat directly across from them, like a suspect being evaluated. The seating arrangement wasn't random. He wanted visual harmony with him. He wanted to detain me. I would have made the same arrangements for interrogation. Dominic leaned back comfortably, one arm draped over Rebecca's. Rebecca said she had just retired. Last year, 28 years in the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. It must have been a big change. She glanced at her phone, the screen lighting her face. A different rhythm, I suppose. Different, yes. She didn't necessarily have to be quieter. Rebecca touched Dominic's arm, her fingers gently brushing his. Dominic just closed a big, beautiful, lucrative deal. Tell your father, dear. Okay, she said, and her posture shifted. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. This was her domain. This is where private equity truly impacts. We restructured a $9.2 million acquisition. The numbers, unlike witness testimony in federal cases, are concrete. I listened to this comment silently. Rebecca laughed in a voice that sounded foreign to me. My father also handled some private major investigations, he said, but his voice was unconvincing. He was feigning a smile out of necessity. I'm sure. Dominic's gaze shifted over my shoulder. Still, I doubt federal work quite matches private sector earnings. He smiled. Not bad. Worse, condescending. The next 40 minutes formed a pattern. I'd start a sentence. Rebecca would interrupt. Dominic would point to his accomplishments. Clients, properties, investment frameworks only the knowledgeable would understand. When I mentioned something, a case involving hedge fund fraud, he nodded with the tolerance of an elementary teacher listening to a child describe finger painting. That's intriguing, he said, which meant it wasn't. His phone vibrated twice during my anecdotes. He checked it both times. When he spoke, Rebecca angled toward him, her body forming a closed barrier. I wasn't included. The server delivered the check in a leather portfolio, $315 for my portion. 4 appetizers, 2 entrees, wine I hadn't requested. I reached for my wallet, the leather worn soft from 3 decades in my pocket. Let me handle my half, only fair. Dominic's hand waved dismissively, already producing a black titanium card. Unnecessary, Mr. Brennan. His smile broadened, generous and patronizing simultaneously. I understand that on a government pension, $315 might be substantial. My treat. The card hit the portfolio with a decisive click. I looked at Rebecca, waited for her to respond. Anything. She was watching Dominic, her expression radiating approval. "That's so thoughtful of you, honey." She didn't glance toward me, didn't acknowledge what he'd insinuated, that I couldn't afford dinner, that I was financially vulnerable, that his wealth made him superior. The insult hung in the atmosphere, perceptible to everyone, ignored by her. Well, I folded my napkin, positioning it beside my plate. "Thank you for dinner. Any time." Dominic signed the receipt with theatrical flair. "We should arrange this again. Perhaps somewhere less upscale next time. I know these high-end establishments can feel intimidating." Rebecca smiled, still wouldn't look at me. They departed together, Dominic's hand on the small of her back, Rebecca laughing at something he whispered. She didn't turn around. I walked to my vehicle alone. My 11-year-old Honda parked between a Porsche and a Range Rover. The drive home consumed 25 minutes. I didn't activate the radio. My hands remained steady on the wheel, my breathing controlled, but my mind was processing patterns the way it had for 28 years in federal investigations. Dominic wasn't merely arrogant, he was calculated. Every comment strategic, every gesture intentional. He'd positioned himself above me from the instant I entered, and Rebecca had facilitated it. I pulled into my driveway and remained in the darkness, engine ticking as it cooled. One thought emerged, crystalline and cold. I know exactly what Dominic is. The question was, does Rebecca? The week following moved like frozen syrup. I maintained routines, morning coffee on the back deck, afternoon walk, evening news in my leather chair. But my mind kept returning to Dominic's smile when he dismissed my money. When Rebecca called Thursday saying she needed to discuss something, I convinced myself I was overthinking. Young couple anxious about family integration. Normal. She arrived Friday morning at 9:30, her car entering with velocity suggesting urgency. I met her at the entrance. "Dad." Her smile was radiant, authentic, Dominic proposed. The happiness struck me before rational thought could moderate it. My arms opened instinctively. "Rebecca, that's fantastic. Come here." She stepped into the embrace, and for 6 seconds, we were simply father and daughter, celebrating wonderful news. Then she withdrew, and I noticed tension in her shoulders. "Let's sit," she said. "There's considerable ground to cover." We moved to the den. She perched on the sofa edge, hands clasped. I occupied my usual chair, still smiling. "So, when's the ceremony? Have you selected a date?" "September 8th. I know it's accelerated, but Dominic's parents wanted early fall, and the venue had availability." "Which venue?" "Boston Waterfront Estate." She said it rapidly, monitoring my reaction. "Dominic's parents are funding everything, so you don't need to stress about expenses." Something in my chest constricted. I wasn't stressed about expenses. I'm your father. "I know, Dad." "I just mean," she examined her hands, "it's going to be exceptionally elegant. Black tie mandatory. I can rent a tuxedo, Rebecca." "Of course, that's not," she halted. "Dominic's family maintains certain standards, traditional. His parents, Harrison and Patricia, they're prominent in Boston social circles. The guest list is carefully curated." I waited. In interrogations, silence compels people to reveal more than questions do. "It's intimate," she continued, "very exclusive. Approximately 75 people, so some of your colleagues, Thomas, the Richardson family, people from the bureau, the venue has capacity restrictions." "Which colleagues aren't invited, Rebecca? It's not personal. Dominic's family has numerous relatives and business connections, and the venue limitations. You're informing me that my colleagues can't attend your wedding?" Her jaw tightened. I'm saying it's a small ceremony. Dominic's parents are investing $52,000. They receive input on the guest list. I stood, needing distance, and walked to the kitchen. My hands located a glass, filled it with water I didn't desire. Behind me, Rebecca's voice followed. Also, Dominic suggested we maintain aesthetic consistency, so photographs appear unified. Perhaps something understated in your attire so you don't draw attention. The glass felt substantial in my hand. You want me to dress modestly at my daughter's wedding so I don't embarrass you? That's not, Dad. Please. His family is traditional. They notice details. I just want everything perfect. Perfect for them. Perfect for us. Her voice hardened. This is my wedding. Can't you just cooperate? Wear something appropriate, not make this complicated? I positioned the glass down carefully. When have I ever complicated your life? You haven't. That's not... She exhaled forcefully. I'm just requesting you blend in. Is that unreasonable? Blend in at my own daughter's wedding? Yes, Rebecca. That's unreasonable. She stood abruptly. Fine. Wear whatever you want. But don't expect me to defend you when Harrison and Patricia comment. I won't expect anything from you anymore. She grabbed her purse, moved toward the door, then pivoted. You know what your problem is? You can't accept that I'm building something better than what you gave me. Dominic's family has resources, influence, connections, things that matter. And what did I give you? A modest suburban house and government employment stories. The words landed like physical blows. I see. She left. The door didn't slam. It closed with a soft, final click. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the closed door for several minutes. The water glass sat abandoned on the counter. My reflection appeared faintly in the window above the sink. 58 years old, gray hair, lines around my eyes from decades scrutinizing financial documents and fraudulent statements. I'd spent my entire career pursuing people who believed wealth placed them above consequences. People exactly like the Vanderbilts. The following morning, I sat at my desk in the spare bedroom I'd converted into an office. My laptop hummed quietly. The room smelled like old books and coffee. I opened a new document and typed, Vanderbilt family, background research. If Dominic and his parents wanted to treat me like I was insignificant, that was their choice. But I'd learned something crucial during 28 years investigating financial crimes. Wealthy families who flaunted their status often had vulnerabilities they desperately wanted hidden. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was simply doing what I'd always done, gathering information, being thorough. Harrison Vanderbilt owned Vanderbilt Capital Management, private equity firm, established 1987. I found their website easily, sleek design, photos of Harrison in expensive suits at charity galas, press releases about successful acquisitions, everything polished to perfection. I dug deeper. Public records showed several properties. The primary residence in Beacon Hill, estimated value $3.7 million. The Cape Cod villa Rebecca had mentioned, 2 luxury vehicles registered, country club memberships, all the visible markers of success. But I wasn't interested in what was visible. I spent the next week doing research, not obsessively, just methodically, an hour each morning before my walk, another hour in the evening. I accessed databases I still had clearance to use. Professional courtesy from former colleagues who hadn't forgotten that I'd trained half the current financial crimes division. Corporate filings revealed interesting details. Vanderbilt Capital Management had restructured twice in 5 years. Not necessarily suspicious, but worth noting. Their client list wasn't public, but investment disclosures showed patterns. Aggressive strategies, high-risk portfolios, the kind of approach that generated impressive returns during market upswings and catastrophic losses during downturns. I made notes, dates, amounts, connections between companies, nothing dramatic yet, just pieces of a puzzle I wasn't certain existed. Thomas Chen called on Wednesday. He'd been my partner for 12 years before retiring 2 years ahead of me. We still met monthly for lunch. Heard Rebecca's getting married, he said. Congratulations, thank you. You don't sound enthusiastic. I'm not invited to include my colleagues. Venue capacity issues, apparently. Silence on the other end. Then, that's unfortunate. The Vanderbilt family is funding everything. They have particular standards. Vanderbilt? Harrison Vanderbilt's kid? You know him? Know of him. His firm came up peripherally in an investigation maybe 6 years ago. Nothing stuck, but there were questions about some offshore structures, aggressive tax strategies. Legal, technically, but pushing boundaries. I wrote down every word. After we hung up, I opened a new search. Offshore structures, tax strategies. I found references to shell companies, entities registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, all legal on the surface, all designed to minimize tax obligations through complex arrangements that existed in gray areas of financial regulation. Still nothing definitively illegal, but interesting. By the end of the second week, I had accumulated a substantial file. Nothing that proved wrongdoing, just inconsistencies, questions that deserved answers. Financial structures that seemed unnecessarily complex for a firm of their size. I sat back in my chair, studying the documents spread across my desk. Was I being vindictive? Perhaps. Was I being thorough? Absolutely. Rebecca called that Friday, short conversation. The wedding was proceeding. She'd found her dress. Dominic was handling the music selection. She didn't ask about my attire, didn't mention our previous discussion, spoke to me like I was a distant relative being kept informed out of obligation. I'll be there, I told her. Good, she said, and I heard relief. Probably feared I'd boycott. I wouldn't miss it. After we ended the call, I returned to my research. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted understanding, because something about the Vanderbilts felt wrong, and 28 years of investigating financial crimes had taught me to trust that instinct. 3 weeks before the wedding, I submitted a formal inquiry to the IRS regarding potential irregularities in corporate tax filings for Vanderbilt Capital Management. Not an accusation, just a request for review. Standard procedure for concerned citizens who noticed discrepancies in public financial documents. The IRS didn't respond immediately. They never did. But I knew the process. My inquiry would be logged, reviewed. If merit existed, assigned to an investigator. I didn't tell Rebecca, didn't tell anyone. I simply continued my daily routines. Morning coffee, afternoon walks, evening news, and waited. September 8th arrived with crystalline blue skies and temperatures perfect for an outdoor ceremony. I dressed in my rented tuxedo, adjusted the bow tie 3 times in the mirror, and drove to Boston Waterfront Estate alone. The venue was spectacular. Manicured lawns sloping toward the harbor, white chairs arranged in precise rows, floral arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Guests arrived in luxury vehicles, dressed immaculately, speaking in cultivated tones of old money and new wealth combined. I parked my Honda at the far edge of the lot, between a Tesla and a Bentley. Inside the estate's reception hall, I located my seat. Third row, aisle position, not front row with immediate family, third row. The placement communicated everything. Dominic's parents arrived fashionably late. Harrison Vanderbilt was tall, silver-haired, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost $5,000. Patricia wore emerald silk and diamonds that caught sunlight like fractured ice. They moved through the crowd, receiving greetings like royalty, accepting tribute from subjects. Harrison's eyes found me eventually, a brief glance, assessment, dismissal. He said something to Patricia. She looked over, smiled politely, looked away. I wasn't worth their attention. The ceremony began precisely on schedule. Rebecca looked beautiful in her gown, radiant in ways that momentarily made me forget everything else. For those 10 minutes watching her walk down the aisle, I was simply a father watching his daughter marry. Pride and melancholy intertwined so completely I couldn't distinguish them. Then the reception began, and reality reasserted itself. Dominic and Rebecca circulated among tables, greeting guests, accepting congratulations. They reached my table eventually. Rebecca hugged me briefly, her embrace perfunctory. "Beautiful ceremony," I told her. "You look stunning." "Thank you, Dad." She was already looking past me toward the next table. Dominic shook my hand with the same enthusiasm he'd shown at our first dinner. "Mr. Brennan, glad you could attend." Then they moved on. I remained at my table, eating overpriced catered food, watching my daughter laugh with people I didn't know, living a life I wasn't part of. Harrison Vanderbilt approached the microphone for his toast. His voice carried across the reception hall, confident and commanding. He spoke about family legacy, about Dominic's accomplishments, about the bright future ahead. He mentioned Rebecca briefly, praising her beauty and her fortunate choice in marrying into the Vanderbilt family. He didn't mention me once. When dinner concluded, guests mingled. I stood near the bar, holding a glass of water I didn't want, observing. That's when I heard it. Patricia Vanderbilt's voice, not quite loud enough to be public address, but not quiet enough to be private either. She was speaking with 2 other women, standing 15 feet away near the floral display. "Rebecca's father," she said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "Government employee, I believe. Retired recently. Very economical in his choices." The women glanced toward me. One smiled sympathetically. The other's expression suggested mild distaste. Harrison joined them, following their gaze. "Ah, yes." He adjusted his cufflinks. Dominic mentioned him. Something about local assistance programs, wasn't it? Public resources? Patricia laughed lightly. "Oh, Harrison, don't be cruel. I'm sure he's perfectly respectable. Just different circumstances from our usual circle." "Different circumstances," Harrison repeated. "Indeed. Some people simply never acquire certain refinements. No fault of their own, really. Just unfortunate." More laughter rippled through their small group. Soft, cultured laughter that felt more cutting than shouts would have been. I remained motionless, glass in hand, face neutral. 28 years of maintaining composure during interrogations, during testimony, during moments when showing emotion would have been counterproductive. I employed every technique now. Dominic approached his parents. I watched him lean close, say something. All 3 glanced toward me again. Dominic smiled, said something else. Harrison laughed outright this time. Patricia touched Dominic's arm affectionately. "Oh, darling, you're terrible." but she was smiling. Rebecca appeared beside them. She looked toward me briefly, her expression unreadable. Patricia said something to her. Rebecca's face shifted. Not quite a smile, not quite agreement, but not defense either. She turned away. That moment crystallized everything. My daughter, surrounded by people mocking her father, chose to turn away. I carefully placed my water glass on a nearby table, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the exit. No dramatic departure. No scene. I simply left. Outside, the evening air felt sharp and clean. I walked to my Honda, sat in the driver's seat, and remained there for several minutes, staring through the windshield at nothing. My phone vibrated. A text message from Thomas Chen, IRS, initiated preliminary audit of Vanderbilt Capital Management. Confidential source inquiry flagged potential irregularities. Thought you'd want to know. I read the message 3 times, closed the phone, started the engine. The drive home took 30 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio, just drove, processing everything. The ceremony, the reception, Patricia's comments, Harrison's laughter, Rebecca's turned back, and now the audit. At home, I changed out of the tuxedo, hung it carefully for return, made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. The IRS audit would proceed independently now. My initial inquiry had triggered their protocols. They discovered what I'd suspected: offshore structures that pushed legal boundaries, deductions that required scrutiny, tax strategies that demanded explanation. I hadn't fabricated anything, hadn't falsified evidence, had simply directed appropriate authorities toward publicly available information that raised legitimate questions. If Vanderbilt Capital Management was completely legitimate, the audit would confirm that. If irregularities existed, they'd be revealed. Either way, consequences would follow. I received the first indication 3 weeks later. Thomas called again. The audit's expanding, he said. They found discrepancies in offshore reporting. Nothing criminal yet, but substantial penalties likely. Word is spreading in financial circles. Some clients are nervous. I thanked him for the information and continued my routines. 6 weeks after the wedding, Rebecca called. Her voice was strained, confused. "Dad, something strange is happening. Dominic's firm is being audited. The IRS. It's causing problems. Clients are leaving. His parents are furious." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said neutrally. "They're saying someone reported them. Someone with government connections who knew how to file complaints that would be taken seriously." Silence stretched between us. "Dad," she said finally, her voice small, "did you do something?" I filed a legitimate inquiry about potential tax irregularities I observed in public documents. That's all. The IRS conducts its own investigations based on merit. Because of the wedding? Because of what happened? I did what any responsible citizen would do when noticing potential violations. The timing is coincidental. That's not true. Her voice rose. You did this because you're angry, because Dominic's family has money and you don't. This is revenge. No, Rebecca, this is accountability. If they've done nothing wrong, the audit will confirm that. If they have, they'll face consequences. That's how the system works. You're destroying them. Dominic says they might lose everything. The firm, their reputation, everything. I'm not destroying anything. If they're being destroyed, it's by their own choices, their own actions. I simply ensured those actions received appropriate scrutiny. She hung up without saying goodbye. 3 months after the wedding, the audit concluded. Findings: $53,000 in penalties for improper offshore structures, $38,000 in back taxes owed, recommendations for improved compliance procedures, not criminal charges, but permanent marks on their financial record. Vanderbilt Capital Management lost 18 clients, revenue declined 40%. Harrison was forced to resign from 2 charitable boards. Patricia withdrew from the Boston Garden Society committee. Rebecca stopped calling entirely. I continued my daily routines: morning coffee, afternoon walks, evening news. Life proceeded with quiet consistency. 7 months after the wedding, on a Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca's car appeared in my driveway. I watched from the window as she sat there for 5 full minutes before finally emerging. I opened the door before she knocked. We looked at each other silently. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. She entered, moved to the living room, sat on the sofa edge exactly as she had before the engagement announcement. I took my usual chair. "The audit destroyed them," she said finally. "Not financially, they're recovering, but their reputation. Harrison can't show his face at the country club. Patricia's friends avoid her. Dominic's firm lost so many clients he had to lay off staff." I remained silent. "Dominic blames me," she continued. "Says I should have controlled you, should have prevented this. His parents barely speak to me. At family dinners, I'm tolerated, not welcomed. I'm sorry you're experiencing that, are you?" Her voice sharpened. "You did this deliberately, calculated revenge because they insulted you, because I didn't defend you. They called me impoverished, mocked my career, laughed at my clothing. You turned away. I let that sink in. So yes, I ensured they faced consequences for their arrogance, not revenge, justice." "Justice?" She laughed bitterly. "You filed complaints because your feelings were hurt. I filed legitimate complaints about actual violations." The IRS found real irregularities, Rebecca, not fabricated ones, real financial misconduct that they'd been committing for years. She looked down at her hands. Dominic finally admitted his father pushed boundaries with offshore accounts, said lots of wealthy people do it, then lots of wealthy people should face audits. I leaned forward. "Rebecca, I didn't create their problems. I exposed them. There's a difference, but you targeted them specifically because of me, because of the wedding. Yes, I targeted them specifically because they treated me like garbage and you let them. But my targeting doesn't change the fact that they were actually guilty." We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, a car passed. Someone walking a dog. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "That depends on you. If you understand why I acted, if you recognize that their treatment of me was unacceptable and your silence was complicity, then we can potentially rebuild something. But it won't be what it was." "I know," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Dad. Sorry is a beginning. Understanding is what matters. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I finally do." We sat together as afternoon light shifted through the windows. Eventually, she asked about my week. I told her about the book I was reading. Small talk, careful, testing whether conversation was still possible. "Can I come back next week?" she asked when she stood to leave. "I'd like that." She hugged me at the door, a real embrace this time. When she pulled back, tears were streaming down her face. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart." I watched her car disappear. The evening air was cool. Inside, the house felt quieter, but not empty. I hadn't won anything. I'd simply refused to accept humiliation without response. defended my dignity, perhaps taught my daughter something valuable about integrity. The phone rang later. I let it ring. Whatever it was could wait. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left.